Hello, this is Dr. J back with another mini update for my Commander X16 devlog. Things are still really busy for me. I'm currently working on studying to get a certification that I have to get for my job, and that is taking a lot of my free time and hasn't left me with a lot of time for X16 development still, unfortunately. And that's going to continue to be taking a fair amount of my time for probably the next couple of weeks. This is also something I mentioned on my community page, but I wanted to also do this video update just because I think a lot of people don't even know about the community page, or even if they do, they never check it. So this way, it's not just people who look at the community page that get this update. Also, just as a brief aside, if you do notice that I still am publishing a fair amount of videos every week and you're thinking, well, it doesn't really look like you're all that busy if you're having time to publish like this ongoing Let's Play you've been doing. That's something I recorded months ago and just pre-scheduled it to update. And it's a very long Let's Play, so that pre-schedule stretches out for months. But that's not stuff I'm actually recording right now, so I just wanted to mention that just in case you noticed that and it seemed like a strange contradiction to what I'm saying. Actually, there is no contradiction there. Now, all that said, this update is not exclusively to whine about how busy I've been. I have done a little bit of initial work on Dungeon Commander, as its working title is, and there have been some developments. So the first way that I considered doing the first-person perspective was using pre-rendered transformations, where since I have a very limited discrete number of views I need to display, rather than doing any real-time rendering, I could essentially just compute the transformations ahead of time by doing the math up front, put them into a bunch of lookup tables, and just use those to do the rendering. And that would almost certainly work. In fact, it definitely would work if I did it correctly. But the issue is that generating those pre-rendered transformation lookup tables such that they're space efficient and fast enough for the CPU to render the scene using them would be a lot of complex upfront work that I simply haven't had the time to do. I also looked into implementing a raycasting algorithm. Raycasting, which is strictly not the same thing as ray tracing, is a relatively straightforward technique for rendering walls in a three-dimensional manner where you basically split up your viewing area into a bunch of vertical slices, and for each of those slices you cast a ray out from the player's point of view, incrementing it by certain predetermined amounts and putting a lot of the more computationally intensive math into lookup tables and so on. You just cast that ray out until you hit a wall, and then you get the part of the wall texture that corresponds to that, and then you render it to the corresponding vertical strip on the screen. And it's a relatively straightforward technique. I pseudo-coded a raycasting algorithm that would probably work fast enough to get the job done. But the big problem is that rendering floors and ceilings with raycasting is far more computationally expensive than rendering walls, and it would definitely be too slow to do entirely with the CPU. And as an aside, this is probably why the floor and ceiling are solid colors in Vault of the Vindicator. The problem is I can't get away with doing that because my game idea called for floor tiles with specific effects, so it's not really optional for me to be able, for the player to be able to distinguish different cells of the floor from each other. So I can't get away with just making it a solid color like that, unfortunately. Not to mention it just doesn't look as cool as it does if you actually have textured floors and ceilings. Now, I stopped by the Commander X16 Discord server, and there I learned about something interesting that I had not come across in any of the tutorials and other material that I had consulted up till today. And that's that there was a firmware update to the Vera called FX, which among other things includes an affine transformation helper that could be used to render the ceiling and floor textures with sufficient speed. Some pretty impressive things can apparently be accomplished using this, including what looks like a Duke Nukem 3D-like engine being worked on by a fellow with the username KGSWS. It's really impressive stuff, and so there's no question that my first-person view could be accomplished. But this has led to a couple of issues that I've been considering. The first one is, and I want to stress, I am in no way whatsoever disparaging the impressive capabilities of the Vera FX or the amazing things that people are doing with it. But this is kind of starting to get beyond, to get more advanced than what I want to do on the Commander X16. A big part of the appeal of Commander X16 development for me is making really primitive games, the kind of thing that, a little more advanced than what you get on an NES or a Sega Master System, but, the kind of thing that you could see on an SNES or a Sega Genesis, but without even, like, for example, the Mode 7 pseudo 3D graphics that the SNES was capable of rendering, as primitive as they were. If I wanted to make a real-time textured 3D engine, to be honest, I'd kind of rather just go whole hog and just go back to using the engine that I demonstrated in some previous videos that I made to work utilizing the capabilities of modern hardware, rather than, squeezing that capability out of the Commander X16. Again, that is in no way disparaging what other developers are doing on the X16. Like, it's impressive and really cool. I'm just saying that I personally am not really interested in going that direction with it. I want to stick to making games that kind of look like they're somewhere between 8 and 16-bit, rather than these things that are almost starting to practically look like something you could see on the PlayStation 1. And secondly, given how I've been too busy lately to be getting much of anything done, I think I have to accept a compromise with reality. And the realities of my job sometimes getting very busy and having, other responsibilities and obligations outside my job, and just pivot away from my idea of the first-person view. I mentioned in the previous video that that might be necessary. I still want to go with a Dungeons & Dragons-like RPG for my first game, but I think at this point I'm ready to say that I'm going to abandon the first-person view idea and fall back on a tile-based overhead view, which will honestly allow me to leverage a lot more of the functionality I built with my X16 library anyway. One major downside of the first-person dungeon crawler idea was that I had spent all that time developing that library, and then my first game idea couldn't even leverage a lot of its functionality. So, switching to an overhead view RPG will have the added benefit of letting me leverage that library, which already does the rendering work for me. And so it'll be a lot more realistic to actually finish a game that way, even though sometimes life intrudes and gets busy and prevents me from getting as much done as I would like. With that decided, the next question that I haven't answered yet is whether I want to make something that's more of a CRPG like the original Baldur's Gate or Temple of Elemental Evil, albeit obviously with a more primitive, lower resolution orthographic view instead of an isometric view, but with the same sort of emphasis on a D&D-like RPG with a detailed story and characters. Or if I want to make something more akin to a roguelike, with randomly generated levels, less emphasis on story, and higher emphasis on lots of dungeon crawling and replayability. I could go either way on that one. So if you, viewer, have any input about which kind of game you would prefer to see, feel free to leave a comment. If there is clearly widespread consensus support for one idea over the other, story-heavy CRPG or a more crawly roguelike, then that could potentially sway my decision. So feel free to make your voice heard if you have a preference. Alright, so that's going to do it for this little mini update. Sorry again that it's been a while since I've been able to do a real proper update with, like a actual game to show off or anything, but you know how it is. That's just life sometimes. I am still fully intending to get back to this in earnest once things become a little less frantic for me. So there really is more content coming. It's just going to be a while. So I do appreciate all of your viewers' patience, and I'm very flattered by the fact that my Commander X16 dev videos have gotten the attention that they have gotten. So, like I said, definitely am going to get back to it once life settles down a little bit. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time, whenever time permits, for some more retro game development goodness. Goodbye for now.